Greetings, fellow Gothamites. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And Rohith Dharr.
And welcome to our SpoilerCast for the latest entry in the DC animated canon. That's right. It's the doom that came to Gotham, the loving adaptation of Mike Mignola's Lovecraftian Elseworlds tale. Alrighty. Dragon or Rohith, I'm gonna go last. I'm gonna let you two go first on this one.
Okay.
I'm fine either way, Dragon, so I don't know if you want to start or...
Can you start, Dragon?
All right, so I guess...
Start us off?
Yeah, I'm trying to start. Anyway. Yeah, so I've still not fully. I was hoping to do it in conjunction. Let's just say it's kind of a birthday gift sort of thing here. I have not been able to read The Doom That Came to Gotham, mainly because until the release of this film, it's been a very hard book to get a hold of. But so I never read the original story. I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I've heard kind of like people talk about the comparisons to the book. But this was I always heard that Mignola, he mainly wrote 3 Batman stories, and 2 of them were the big Elseworlds stories. Of course, one of them being the hugely important one with Gotham by Gaslight, essentially the original Elseworlds story, essentially. But yeah, I've always had an intrigue in this one. The fact, oh god, this is the other Mignola story, other one that Mignola worked on. Now, it's a fact that Lovecraft right up not just Mignola's alley, but right up the alley of like what to do with Batman. Arkham Lovecraft, Arkham Asylum. It just kind of goes hand in hand. It was. I was very much anticipating.
How did I not know that was his first name? I literally never knew that.
What?
That you're saying Lovecraft's first name was Arkham.
Well, no, I'm not saying that Lovecraft's first name was Arkham. No, it's H.P. Lovecraft. I'm saying that Lovecraft did like a chapter of his books that include Arkham. That's where the Arkham name comes from.
Okay, got it. Okay, I was about to feel really fucking stupid. Okay.
The fact, did you ever get around to Lovecraft Country? I can't remember.
No.
I think Lovecraft Country, they kind of splice
and given
together.
The Jonathan Major stuff, I'm probably not going to.
All right, fact. Okay, let's just say, Tiki, you went in a time machine, you went back in time, you watched Lovecraft Country. Had you done that, you would have seen a bunch of threaded Lovecraft books kind of adapt or tales.
Or even if not watching the TV show, you could read the book that the TV show is based on.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm saying, is it all in one book or is this the series? It has to be like a series of books, right?
I think it's just the one book.
Really?
I don't. I'm not 100% certain, but I know there is just Lovecraft Country. I don't know if there's like a sequel book or whatnot. I just know there was like a book called Lovecraft Country, which the TV show is based on. So,
well, regardless, my point being, this is an anticipated film for me because one, I love the DC original animated films, particularly when they adapt like the graphic novels and the standalone stuff. I think that's kind of them at their best, at their core. At the very least, obviously there've been some bumps along the road, but for the most part, when we do that, it can be pretty spectacular. And I loved Gotham by Gaslight and its animated adaptation in kind of the Mignola style. So I was impressed by this, but I will full out say I don't love it as much as I do Gotham by Gaslight. I don't think it's as 1-to-1, but also might have something to do with the fact that Mignola didn't, he wrote this story. He did not do the guts of the book. Obviously, when they did the animated movie, they're trying to get as much Mignola on the screen as they can. There's a lot of Mignola in the writing that's translating to the visuals. But at the end of the day, I respect the heck out of this thing for making the most of an Elseworlds story. Like it goes to it. It kind of recontextualizes the Batman mythology in a way we've never seen it before. And it may not be my go-to Batman, but it's quite unique. I got to give it that. It was well done. If you're gonna do a Mignola Lovecraftian Batman, this is how you do it.
All right, Rohith, what were your thoughts? I think in watching the movie, for most of my viewing experience I was thinking like, okay, this is definitely Mike Mignola, sort of just Hellboy, but substitute Batman for Hellboy in a story like that. And obviously, it was cool for sort of the visual aesthetics that were molded to fit into the steampunk Lovecraftian world that Mignola wanted to craft. And I think for the most part, I was like, oh, this is decent. And then in the third act, I feel like, oh, where they went in terms of the visuals, in terms of the thematic ideas and to the overall conclusion of the piece, it elevated to me from a decent film to a great film.
Yep.
And I really appreciated this film really committing to the Lovecraftian, not just the imagery and sort of the dread that comes from of having that particular imagery or abstraction of horror, but having at its core a very humanistic, light to it, to where I think the horror of it worked really well because you have sort of this human, innate goodness with Bruce as Batman and the people around him that are helping him or assisting him, fighting against that evil. It wasn't just sort of like how if it was sort of just like, oh, this is just Batman, this into Lovecraftian, it's all abject horror, terror, darkness. It is there, but there is that innate sort of goodness that's sort of intermixed with that darkness. And I think what the movie ends is just really cool and a good melding of like the ethos of Batman, the ethos of Lovecraft. And I think probably Mignola did it well in the comic, but in this movie, I think it's done really well.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm probably the lowest of you three. Rohit, honestly, I feel like I had a very similar reaction to the first 2/3. And I also like the third act a lot more, and I do think it comes together, elevates it. I still wouldn't call this great, per se, at least for me. My big frustration with this movie is kind of two things. Number one, it feels a little bit like we're trying to cram a lot into this movie. And so in that regard, it feels a little exposition heavy with some of the lore and some of the mythology. There's just frankly like a couple too many scenes of just characters just kind of like, dumping background onto Bruce. And then a problem, I like the aesthetics of this movie, but this is probably just like a budget thing. And to a certain extent, I get that this is probably like a wider problem with DC animated movies. I did not care for the actual animation in a lot of senses. Like the way that the characters actually moved, I felt was very stiff. And I don't know, that was kind of disappointing. But I will say the biggest disappointment that I had with this movie, Dragon, I'm sorry, but Patrick Fabian, man, he makes a really good Harvey Dent. But they did him dirty with how little screen time.
Well, he doesn't have a big. I don't even think he has a big role in the book. It's a bit part because he's the gateway. It's all his. It's all his role.
It is. It's certainly a bit part, Dragon. It's the most rushed Harvey Dent story I've ever seen.
I got to admit, doesn't it make you hope that it's going to be a thing where, like, we did bring back a voice of Batman for this movie. It makes you hope that, maybe we're going to bring back Fabian as Harvey Dent, another thing,
I could totally see Harvey Dent in, like, a, Fabian Harvey Dent, and I could see Fabian as a live-action Harvey Dent, frankly. I think that'd be wonderful, but...
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm certainly interested in talking about it and breaking it down. Rohit, I'm with you in terms of, like, I did really like the ending. The ending to me felt very Disney Gargoyles in a really fun, cool kind of way.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot to like about this movie, but also there's definitely... chunks of it. There's chunks of it that kind of feel like they're doing too much as far as the substance, as far as like, the exposition dump of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then also chunks where it feels like it's a little bit too style over substance.
Sure. I think to add on to that, I certainly say the biggest weakness I'll say for this movie is that the pacing is just a little like frustration for the first two acts, at least more so the first act. Second act kind of picks up, but third act is where it really. I think what you're getting at, Tiki, is that this movie, it feels, it is kind of, even though it's a 3-issue, it is a little bit constrained in like the 90-minute format, and you wonder if maybe you could have just excised a few parts to have it a little bit more streamlined. Because, for example, like Penguin doesn't have to be in the story, right?
I like the lore that they set up with Penguin.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We actually kind of need the Penguin because he takes us there for the journal and everything. As we go to the Arctic.
Here's the thing, though, because you could have that be two separate characters. One character that could have let Batman and his crew finding the journal, and then that different character that was part of like the main group of like pilgrims or whatever. And one thing, like Penguin being there, I think the joke of it, like, oh, he's in Antarctica, Penguin's in Antarctica, like it's kind of a funny thing, but I just don't think it's really worth like, because he barely has, I don't think he speaks, has any dialogue. Well, he has dialogue in the voiceover, but he's just like he's there at the beginning and then is hardly revisited till the end of the story. So I don't think like his presence, like him being just like Oswald Cobblepot the Penguin, I don't think was really as big of a,
I mean, I kind of feel the same way about Harvey Dent, honestly.
I feel less so with Harvey because at least with Harvey, he is somewhat pivotal, and because like the way like his design is kind of horrific because he's not like just regular Two-Face. It's like the other half of his body is like a cancerous tumor that spreads around the wall and leads to this like portal into like this Cthulhu madness realm, and I think it was cool. And him having been, Poison Ivy is a cool callback to like
Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it would have been. I wish it was more developed with Harvey because the whole idea of Two-Face with the duality of like good and evil, I think would have been a really interesting thing to have been tackled more and put more in the forefront, especially with Cthulhu and Lovecraft and the whole idea of like the darkness and like Lovecraftian elder beings corrupting certain individuals and turning them to madness. I think there would have been something interesting if like Harvey Dent became Two-Face because he was corrupted by madness because of the Cthulhu beings, whereas Bruce is like inside or seeing the big monster didn't turn him mad, or maybe he did became mad by just becoming Batman. Those would have been interesting things. So I think.
Well, don't get me wrong. Where we end up with Harvey is certainly interesting. I'm just saying, as far as like, it literally was like the absolute bare minimum they could have done with him.
No, that's where I wish he was a little bit more development on his part. Whereas I think Cobblepot, like I don't think there's anything interesting about for the Cobblepot to be in that story. He could have just been any other like wealthy, Gotham magnate like Rupert Thorne, Hamilton Hill, or even Roman Sionis. Like any like prominent wealthy Gothamite could have fit into Cobblepot's role in both the beginning and the end of the film. I don't think Penguin needed there beyond just the gag of like him being in Antarctica.
I feel that. And yet they resisted the temptation to use Mr. Freeze.
Well, no, Tiki, that is kind of their take on Mr. Freeze, though.
What, the Penguin?
Not the Penguin. No, the guy in the freeze suit, Tiki. The guy who's the whole ice thing. Grindon, the guy with no arms.
Okay, right. I'm sorry, they don't call him Mr. Freeze, so...
They do call him Mr. Zero, though, which was Mr. Freeze's original name.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we're just kind of playing Sub-Zero. I mean, I get the whole conceit of it, but I also think it's like... I also kind of wish, like, he was more, like... Victor Freeze, and maybe
I will say it. I feel like it takes us a long time to actually even get back to Gotham, like a good 20 minutes or so, and that hurts the pacing of the movie.
Yeah, you could have made it like a quick. I think about like say for the New Frontier, like how like sort of the quick like.
Sorry, are we just talking about the movie now? Because I felt like we were transitioning to starting to talk about the movie. I just want to make sure we're like.
Yeah, we're in it.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so I guess talking about it. Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I like one of the really cool layers to this that we added is the fact that the reason we don't start immediately in Gotham is this is Bruce Wayne. When he left Gotham, he was on the road for 20 years, and that's where he got all the Robins and everything. So this is all part of like that 20-year journey, and he goes back to Gotham finally once he's ready. Once he's.
That's the thing, Dragon. I feel like that's a cool plot point. I just don't really think the movie explains that well enough.
I mean, they spell it out Alfred says, "Hey, you're ready to come back?" Yes, I am. There's the costume. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Well, I kind of agree with Tiki because for me, it's like when the costume.
I just don't get the weight of the 20 years, is what I'm saying.
No. Well,
I understand that they spell it out. I'm just saying, like, I don't. I wish there was more of. I don't know. Rohit, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I think what Tiki's trying to get at is because, like, when the costume pops up, it's like, okay, has Bruce just been traveling around the world and then just has a random Batman costume and hasn't used it until he comes back to Gotham? Has it been Batman but outside of Gotham City? Like, what? That's the thing. That was kind of a question for me. It's like, okay, because the typical Batman story is like, okay, Bruce travels around, learns all those skills, comes to Gotham, establishes the Batman identity in Gotham City. But the fact that he has a Batman costume while he's just doing his travel rounds led me to have more questions. It's like, okay, he has the Batman motif, and then he just made a costume, and either he became Batman and just did his Batman stuff outside of Gotham City and is now coming back to Gotham and being traditional Batman, or he's
also already hooked up with Lucius Fox by this point.
Yeah. I mean, look, maybe it's not all spelled out, but I don't know. I think my read on it was that, okay, he's developed the bat suit, he's been training for this, so hence them bring up the 20 years thing. So he's going back to Gotham with a purpose, and the purpose is the costume. We had a big reveal of the costume, which to me conveyed that, okay, he's going to put on for the first time suiting up as Batman.
Yeah, I was like, is it 20 years from when he's 8 or 20 years from when he's like 18 and goes out of the world? I mean, but that's splitting hairs. I think he might be just tired of
So as for the Bat family in this movie, conceptually, I think it's a really good idea that we like put him through the ringer and fucking Dick and stand in for Jason Todd. We killed both of them, man. They're both dead.
I didn't realize
that was a bold choice for sure. I didn't realize
the Indian kid was actually Jason Todd.
Yeah, Sanjay Todd.
And
Todd.
Todd.
I don't know if that last name is an actual Indian on that last name.
I hear you.
I'm gonna look that up.
Well, they spell it Tawd.
Oh, never mind. It is an actual last name.
It is? Okay.
Yeah,
I guess.
So, I'll give props to Mignola. He did his research. So
well, actually, Todd,
I just don't think either of those two really have much of an actual character, especially this Dick Grayson. I think this Dick Grayson is like just a blank slate of a character.
The little that I know, just I skimmed through some pages I could find of the book without actually physically having the book. I believe Jason Todd. Sorry, Jason Todd. But it's Jason Todd, but we spell Sanjay Todd, but we spell it differently. Todd is Toddy. So. Anyway, I believe that the Indian Jason Todd idea is something that's original for the movie. They did make a few original cool choices, like between that and I believe Kylie Kane, the whole Cassandra Cain nod is original to the movie, if I have it right.
I thought she was just like a race bend Carrie Kelly, because I think with the whole Oliver
that's the thing, they're going for a Carrie Kelly vibe, but there's also it's Cassandra Cain though, and they call her last name is Cain, and she is Asian.
With both of those characters was second time when Cassandra Cain is mixed in with another character that, like, first Birds of Prey with Stephanie Brown, and then now with Carrie Kelly. Man, let's just adapt Cassandra Cain properly. Only Young Justice can do that. But no, I think what I do agree with Tiki that, like, for Dick Grayson, he's just kind of there. He could just be any other like random associate of Bruce. I wish like the Batman characters had a little bit of like their traditional. I kind of wanted to see like the Dick Grayson in this movie do a little bit of acrobatics. And maybe Sanjay Todd could have mentioned like being like a street urchin and being taken in by Bruce when he like stole some stuff from him. But
see that one, more than the other stuff you mentioned, that to me is more of a runtime issue in terms of we can only develop them so much. Like that's more of an example. Yeah, we could have maybe.
I hear you, Dragon. For me, I think there only should have been one of them. Like, I respect the boldness of killing two of them, but it really just feels like, yeah, we're really badass, man. We're killing two Robins.
Okay, based on what we do have, I do like that there's like an inkling of what they bring to the table, in which you have just a little bit like, Sanjay is kind of he's kind of more cocky and lighthearted, where Dick Grayson, again, the whole arc of Bruce Wayne is going from kind of a man of science in the face of the supernatural to ultimately becoming the supernatural. So Dick Grayson is kind of in kind of following in his footsteps and kind of looking to his mentor. Here we see Dick Grayson doing the science before he gets killed off. So there's an inkling there, and then of course, Kylie essentially she gets the keys of the kingdom at the end, to the wine cellar, so to speak.
Which Kylie again, I felt like I feel like she was supposed to be the most well-developed, but honestly, I didn't really get a grasp on her, like, her actual character, if that makes sense. Rohit, what do you think of her?
I think I feel like she could have been better utilized as, like, honestly, this movie could have been from her perspective. And maybe Bruce would have been more aware of the supernatural, and like Kelly could be the one that has the exposition of like the supernatural mythology and everything explained to her, and she could have been there to help assist Bruce and be even there to see like Bruce's like existential drama and realizing his destiny and him becoming like a freaking winged bat. And I think that would have been because I think for Lovecraft stories, there's always like a character or set of characters that are kind of in the dark, metaphorically speaking. And throughout the course of the story, they get to know more and more of the horror realization of the abject terror that is the cosmos. But I think for Carrie Kelly, she could have been the character that, more so than Bruce, like sees that kind of horror and the struggles for her to how to keep her like humanity in light of this.
Sure,
struggling with it, but because when you think about it, really, Oliver Queen surprisingly in a Batman animated movie has a lot more character than a lot of other bad side characters.
Oliver Queen was one of the MVPs in this movie for sure, I think.
I really I like the direction we took with him because, in a sense, I know that this is in the comics as well. I can't tell you which specific comics. I don't think it was there in the original inception of the character, but I know it's very popularized in the Arrow TV show. It was one of the really good things about the early seasons of Arrow. The whole sins of the father idea, that's very much the idea that Oliver Queen, his father, was involved in a lot of bad stuff, and he was trying to kind of fix that when he went back to the city and became a vigilante. So we're kind of taking that acorn of an idea, and we're like him having this whole hang about the sins of the father are heaped upon the sons, and that was his main imperatives. I thought that was a really good idea for him here.
And I think with Bruce also having that sort of same deal with his dad, that's an idea that's been prominent in the Telltale Batman games, sort of played with a bit in the Matt Reeves Batman movie.
Yep.
And in certain, I know in Morrison's run there was like a fake out where maybe like Thomas Wayne was part of a cult or something like that, but it wasn't. But the idea that he could have been involved, so it's definitely taking that sort of thematic trope of like your family legacy having this dark undertones of depression or horror that come back to haunt the present is definitely something that this movie mines really well, especially with Lovecraft being sort of about uncovering the darkness underneath.
Hey, Tiki, we got a companion comment. Highlight it, would you?
Okie dokie. Let's see. We have Warp Monarch says, I mean, this won't be the first time Thomas Wayne has portrayed a darker light. Telltale also portrayed Thomas as a crime boss. Yeah, indeed. I will say that was another one of the things. Like, I found the whole thing about like the pilgrimage to Gotham. That was interesting in its own right.
Oh, yeah, it actually kind of reminds me of like in Grant Morrison's run. There's like in the part where Bruce Wayne's like time traveling back to the present. There's one issue
he
where
does become a pilgrim for a bit.
Yeah, and there's a whole kind of like overarching villain of like Barbados, which is like this demonic entity that is like bat-like or bat-shaped, and it's influenced like humanity's like obsession with bats or whatnot, which leads to like Batman being developed as an idea. So I think
for me, I feel like we've like you guys are saying, we've kind of tread a lot of ground with Thomas Wayne that I almost kind of felt like it was unnecessary for him to be the one to reveal the whole, pilgrimage to Gotham and the dark sacrifices and everything.
I mean, Tiki, let me put it to you this way. All right. There was a change. One of the few, from what I understand, this movie is very faithful to the book with a few alterations, like Sanjay Todd already mentioned, but also like originally it's going to be like a random guy Bruce Wayne didn't know telling him all this in the chair. If it was his father though, and who was involved, and he's fine connecting to the sins of the father idea, I think it's a better choice to make it Thomas Wayne, to have him sit in that chair and have him tell him like, yeah, we screwed up, son. I need you to fix this for me.
Yeah, the sins of the father thing, that's fair enough. It's a thread for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, just aside from the sins of the father thing, a big thematic thread we have in this movie plays really well, I felt. was the theme of madness being transformative. The idea it kind of parallels the classic idea of Batman creating his foes. In this case, our omen of the Bat moment was Bruce Wayne seeing the end of the world in the in the Thing. We call him Igo Sotha. The Thing. The big
It's your
Cthulhu.
something like that, yeah.
Right. So that thing. The fact that he saw that, so the idea that's kind of like the transformative madness that's kind of wrapped up in the bat. So the idea that this thing, everything it permeates with is creating Batman rogues. So it's like turning people to madness. Again, Bruce sees it, and he eventually turns into a Batman. And we have Two-Face. We got Mr. Freeze with Mr. Zero. We got that's the thing. Everyone is going through a transformative journey here, and Poison Ivy and everything. I don't know. I thought that was really cool how we're kind of like literalizing kind of a classic Batman idea, through this kind of supernatural story element.
Yeah, it not necessarily just Batman creating his rogues, but just like Gotham City kind of has like this supernatural predisposition towards corruption and just like madness and crime.
Yeah, the idea that Gotham is doomed from the start because what we essentially reveal in the whole pilgrimage thing is that the wealthy families of Gotham, and I guess the neighboring Gotham, I don't know where we came down to Oliver Queen, if we just made him a Gotham native or not, but let's just say are basically these rich guy founders who literally founded the place on the blood of like animals and stuff and doing like unholy rituals, and basically they built this city on doomed land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight, Dragon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our Batman and Alfred are the same ones we get from Batman Soul of the Ninja. Or, I'm sorry, Soul of...
Yeah, Soul of the Ninja.
Well, the Dragon.
Soul of the Dragon, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the same Batman. Alfred, I mean, I'm trying to remember if Alfred, I think he pops up briefly in Soul of the Dragon, but he's not in that movie a lot if he's there. But yes, David Gintoli, he plays Batman here. I got to tell you, man, I think he and Ackles, no joke, I think they could be kind of the next go-to Batman.
I honestly think vocally he knocked it out of the park this movie. Yeah. I really do. I think especially in the third act, he really leads like a lot of gravitas. I think he's really kind of carrying a lot of those themes.
Yeah, he's doing a great job, and I'd like to hear more from him. Honestly, I think that's what I'm saying. I think we should bring him and Ackles back a bunch because I think they're showing a lot of promise.
And as for Alfred, not a ton to do in this movie, but I just kind of want to point out again the running thing continues. Like Dragon, we have never seen a bad Alfred ever.
You know what's funny? I don't even know if Alfred's in the original book. Or not. What's really cool though about that is what we gain in adding Alfred. One, they had the fridge gag in the comic, but it makes it even funnier with Alfred having to deal with right. I look forward to fetching the roast, but better.
It's just classic. Like we don't really need Alfred here, but it's classic Alfred comedy, man.
On the flip side, though, from the comedy we get with Alfred, on the flip side, we get a really great dramatic moment where this movie goes full tilt. We're always like on the line and questioning ourselves here. We usually pull the ripcord before it goes too far, but Batman actually goes crazy in this movie. That's a big
madness.
And Alfred, yes. And you have that heart. You have a few heartbreaking scenes with Alfred. The big one being Lucius Fox is there, and you're saying, "Man, we should call Hugo Strange." I mean, he's not looking good, Alfred. Like he's got to commit his son. He doesn't want to do it.
I was actually really curious to see this universe's version of Hugo Strange. I was kind of disappointed.
I think one, there's probably a runtime thing, but second, I think we didn't do it because Hugo Strange is also in Gotham by Gaslight.
That's fair. A
lot of other characters are also in that story.
Is this the first time John DiMaggio has done Gordon?
To my knowledge, yes, it's the first time.
I think he did a really good job.
So let's talk about Jimmy Gordon, because that's kind of our thing for him here. So Jimmy Gordon, I love the way him look like Roosevelt, because sometimes in the Matt Wagner's comics, he makes Gordon look a little like Teddy Roosevelt, and I thought that was a really cool idea. But the scene he has in talking about his daughter, the way John DiMaggio
totally, he kills it.
Is that he plays it so in such a sensitive way. Is the fact that he loves his daughter, but it's a very gauche thing for the 1920s to have like a child like dealing with mental illness of any kind, but especially like putting him in Arkham Asylum in a Lovecraftian story, and she looks really creepy, and she's got like the little sound thing coming out of her, out of her throat.
I was actually confused by that. He's like, oh, is she just talking to the class, and that's why it just sounds weird? It's like, oh, she has like a stenography or audio thing, but I really liked kind of her look and the fact that like she is kind of literally the Oracle.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this must be like a steampunk where like there's like tubes or whatever to like put it like transporting messages or information. She has like books or whatever. Like, no, she's like a literal supernatural like seer. And I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool.
But again, I mean, overall, it's just a nice infusion we have of classic Batman stuff. But as we get further and further in our story, we're transitioning into uncharted territory we don't see often, if ever, with Batman. Because we start off like, okay, so early, like in the Act One-ish kind of area, we have Batman as a vigilante. He's taking on some dirty prohibition cops in Langstrom's lab, and he's looking really cool while he's doing it. And then we have him fighting
Langstrom, by the way, including him, was a really good idea, like from a story point of view, to kind of like really highlight the existential terror of the Bat.
But even better is who they got to play him.
No, but also I didn't realize it was actually pretty neat about Kirk Langstrom is like the whole like him connecting or communicating with the bats. It really kind of gives me sort of the idea. I don't know if it's in Lovecraft or just in certain like horror stories where like there's like a certain character that maybe is not communicative or it's antisocial among people, but has like a almost psychic connection with animals. I want to think there's certain horror stories or supernatural tales that kind of had that motif or character type. So I think it was cool for Kirk Langstrom to have that because then that connects more him and Bruce together, and they're kind of being like an avatar of like a bat god or.
What's even better is the fact that he's kind of a foreshadow for like the arc for Batman the movie.
Oh, he totally is. Yeah.
Langstrom is the guy who saw the ending of the movie coming, along with only he and Etrigan know how this movie's supposed to end. Speaking of which, we should talk about Etrigan the Demon. Yeah, real quickly though, warp the Monarch here, but throw the comment up.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's see. He says, this reminds me of the Fog film where the villains are getting revenge against people whose ancestors are murdered and stole their gold to build the town. The Fog, was that the one that has the really? No, that's the Mist. The one that has.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah, you're thinking of the Mist, Stiggy.
Yeah, I don't remember the Fog. And then he says, "Remember John DiMaggio voiced
outrageous." Now, this last one's the one I was getting at here. And Kirk Langstrom is voiced by Jeffrey Combs, who voiced the Question and the Scarecrow in the new Batman Adventures. And here's the best part: main reason they got Jeffrey Combs, aside from just people loving this guy and how he sounds and the fact he's been in the DCAU before, is he was the Reanimator, who was has a big Lovecraft influence. Who, funny enough, they used a character in this movie who's in the comic, and I believe he's basically a pull from Lovecraftian adaptations in the past. Dr. Herbert West, the doctor who gives Harvey Dent the terrible medical treatment. It's just poison ivy. You'll be fine.
Isn't Dr. West just visually based off of Jeffrey Combs' character?
That's the thing. He's visually based off him, and I think the name is like from Lovecraft comics and stuff. So he's a big Lovecraft pull. Okay. It's a loving nod to Jeffrey Combs. I think the Reanimator's real name may have been Dr. Herbert West. I don't know.
I thought Dr. Herbert West was like a twisted homage to Adam West. I was like, oh
God,
no. Initially, I thought it was a Flash reference because we have Green Arrow in the movie, but no, it's not.
Let me address something that I kind of think might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not sure. So I really like the fact that the Al Ghuls in this movie are actually of Middle Eastern descent. That being said, they didn't really have a lot of character outside of just doing their ritual thing. I don't know. I was kind of bored by them a little bit. I gotta be honest with you.
Okay, I'll meet you halfway on that too.
Okay.
So one of me, I love Ra's al Ghul.
Of course.
So that said,
like I said, it was cool to see like a more ethnically correct version of him.
So here's the pro and con of Ra's al Ghul. Pro, the writing and the incorporation of Ra's al Ghul is a real stroke of genius because the whole Testament of Ghul thing, it's a brilliant inclusion of Ra's al Ghul and the fact that he's all about destroying Gotham, watching it burn to the ground, and we're giving him Lovecraftian means of doing so. That's great. That tracks with that guy. Plus, we gave him a Rasputin look, which I'm not saying, I forget how the actual correlation to Lovecraft. In the Hellboy movie, Rasputin, is the guy who summons the Lovecraftian. Basically, same, very similar plotline to the first Hellboy movie, given to a guy named Rasputin with a big beard, kind of like this guy. Con. As much as I love the inclusion of Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul, the main reason I love Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul, we kind of skimp on because Batman doesn't really say two words to Ra's al Ghul except
for sure.
We don't have it's not a classy Ra's al Ghul. Because here he's playing the Rasputin kind of crazy priest. That's essentially who he's playing here. And Talia al Ghul, now to be fair, Talia gets at least the closest thing we were looking for. I was looking for. And here's the fun fact about Talia.
Honestly, the one line Talia does have to Bruce about we could have Dragon. I got to be honest with you, that to me felt like a little fan servicey.
Well, her other line.
Honestly, there were a couple moments in this movie that kind of felt like that. Like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this happened in this alternate universe? Because we know that that's ultimately how it plays out in the actual comics. Well, I don't know. There were a couple moments like that for me.
That said, Tiki, her earlier line, she had a really great line earlier on. The whole you think basically mocking the Bat gimmick, and she says, I'm well acquainted with real demon, jinn, and devils. Okay, you don't, she doesn't buy the whole superstitious and cowardly lot thing, and she calls him out on it.
Uh-huh.
But here's the thing. It's so funny because the take on Talia is, at least visually, and I like to say character-wise, it's like a better written version of Neil. God, rest in peace, Neil Adams. But I love the man. I will say many nice things about the man, but Batman Odyssey's a train wreck. And his take, the way he wrote Talia al Ghul in that story was terrible, and this feels like the better version of that.
It was also interesting that Talia al Ghul had superhuman powers and was just able to go toe to toe with Batman. Kind of felt just sort of inadvertently they got inspiration from the Gotham Knights game, but obviously I presume Mike Mignola had that in the original comic, or the movie just did that independently.
Did she? I don't know if she had. Am I missing something? Did she really have supernatural powers when fighting? She wasn't just really good at fighting, throwing magic stuff at him.
She had glowing green eyes in that game, so I figure she must have some Lazarus Pit energy.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, my read on it was later on, because bear in mind, this is more of maybe it was a little too ambiguous, may or may not, but my read on it was we did kind of a subtle take on the Lazarus Pit here, in which we summoned Ra's al Ghul with actual magic to bring him back, but when we unleashed one of the plague of all the reptiles as an opening act, when he fell into this giant green kind of oasis, which I like to think is a Lazarus Pit, and it's less a literal Lazarus Pit, more of a foreshadowing Lazarus Pit of when he comes out of this thing, we know Batman's going to be reborn by the end of this movie. Kind of like a Lazarus Pit. He's going to be reborn in madness, or at least when he comes out of this thing, he's going to come to a Gotham in madness, which in turn, so it's almost like a slow acting Lazarus Pit, not literally changing him, but symbolically changing.
Well, I think the Lazarus Pit, with him going through that, because I think a few moments after that, when he's just kind of coming back into the city, he then gets the realization of the memory that was repressed in his head and him seeing the thing.
There you go. Maybe it's that.
So it's not just the Lazarus Pit traditionally healing physical wounds, but in this it also healed psychological trauma that was just buried deep and repressed.
Yeah, because the idea. Now, let me ask you this: what is your read on this? Do you think when he saw the bats, it was a buried memory, but do you think when he was traveling the world, was he just traveling the world in basically in building up a war on crime, but deep down it was really to stop the doom that came to Gotham? He was basically thinking, I'm gonna save Gotham in some way, and deep down the real reason was I'm gonna save it specifically from this, and coming out of Lazarus Pit cleared that up for him. I think
it's probably some subconscious thing that definitely, and I think it would have been interesting for people to have commented, or I think this is the kind of thing where I think Tiki is right in a certain extent. It would have been interesting to see this maybe not as an animated movie, but an animated miniseries where Bruce comes to Gotham and does his traditional Batman thing.
And that's what I don't know. I don't know exactly. miniseries, like I just don't know how committed DC would be to doing that. But I think you're right that the actual story kind of calls for a little bit more development than 90 minutes. And by the way, this is actually like, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but 90 minutes is a little on the longer side when it comes to these movies.
That is true, Tiki. It's longer than, at least for a single movie versus like a two-parter, obviously. Not counting a two-parter, this is the longest the single has been, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, because usually isn't it like an hour 10?
Yeah, usually like 75 to at most 85 minutes.
I think there were ones that are like 100 minutes or not for these movies.
I think the longest I've seen before this point is probably, not counting a two-part, is probably 85 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry, just backtracking here a little. Etrigan the Demon.
Honestly, guys, all of the demon / Lovecraftian stuff, cool in concept, some cool designs. Again, I just feel like the way that they actually presented the lore was a little bit of an exposition dump.
Well, if anyone's going to do the exposition dump, Etrigan doing it made sense, though.
It's kind of just funny that, like,
I'm not going to lie, Dragon. I honestly could not really wrap my head around it. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of struggling with the concept beyond just him basically just being a, Lovecraftian otherworldly creature.
Oh yeah, it was like the one trying to warn. And all these stories, there's always one guy that's going to lay out the prophecy. And if we're going to have one guy lay out the prophecy, Etrigan the Demon makes sense, given usually Batman has at least one supernatural friend, and that guy is a supernatural friend.
All right, Rohit, I'm sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I think it would have been. I think for me, Etrigan, like, I think another character could have done what he did, at least the beginning part, because I think it's like if there's someone that can pierce through and see the actual prophecy of things. Like maybe like a Madame Xanadu or even Satana that just like shows up at the beginning and then like sees in the future, sees through some like magical mumbo jumbo, and then presents like the prophecy of doom that comes to Gotham to Bruce. Then I think that would have done the same thing. And rather than Etrigan showing up at the beginning as Jason Blood, turns to Etrigan, then he comes in to save Bruce from the one demon guy, and then afterwards, then like Etrigan comes back in the end with like when he's stuck in the bottle to take on the Thing. It's just like it would have been. I feel like maybe more interesting for Batman to have maybe like instead of having Etrigan like come in and save his ass and like defeat the big monster, Batman could have been made to be more creative or maybe have gone outside of his comfort zone of using just science and reason and maybe for like undertook some magical means of defeating the monsters.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, we killed all the Robins. Oh, so let's talk about like the reveal of Green Arrow being kind of this medieval. He too has been on kind of a training path here. He has like the holy arrows from Saint Sebastian and everything, and I like how we have like a Kylie Kane just kind of like stumbling upon this and kind of like.
I think it's interesting how Oliver, like, he might have, I want to say maybe like the fourth most amount of screen time of all the characters, but I think out of anyone, he is like by far the most fleshed out and interesting and multifaceted. Like I think it's a good example of how, juxtaposed against the Robins, where it's like, you could make the argument that they don't have a lot of screen time to develop them, but like with Oliver, he doesn't have a ton of screen time either, but I think far and away.
We have fun with Oliver too. Like we have him as like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think far and away he's going to be the most memorable element of this movie for me, looking back on it.
What's interesting is when you think about it, he's not really Oliver. He has like elements of Oliver Queen, but really think about it, this version of Oliver Queen in this movie is basically a composite character of Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, and John Paul Valley Azrael.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot. I didn't think of that, but yeah, you're right. There is some John Paul Valley in that.
Yeah, because with the cross, necklace he has, and the whole Knight Templar thing.
I'm a fucking sucker for like like Knight Templar superhero shit. I don't know.
This is gonna sound really dumb. I like the simple idea that the crosses are like are green arrows on the costumes. I was like, oh, that's kind of cute.
Yeah, if anything, you could have easily like had John Paul Valley be the stand-in for, instead of Harley Quinn, be like a friend of Bruce and have him having sort of like a religious, and maybe not as like cavalier, but having that sort of religious background, and I think that would have still worked out.
I think the only reason the reason they had Oliver Queen was twofold. Really. One, because I'm pretty sure he was in the book, and that's the main reason why. Secondly, I think it might have been just I don't know if it was just like the hunter thing, the fact we had arrows, or maybe it was just like a name recognition thing. But when you bring that up, though, it's the sad reminder that John Paul Valley, I feel, is always going to be the hard sell in Batman, no matter what we do. Even if they ever do like a Nightfall thing, John Paul Valley is like the hardest character to sell. And there have been a few examples where like a few ways in which we've kind of slipped him in there and we've had it work. Like we've had him like in the Curse of the White Knight. He's worked really well, and like the Avenger Continues. But it's always like, why on earth would Batman let this guy take up the mantle? He's nuts.
I mean, I think if you were to adapt another media, I don't think you need to necessarily have him take on the mantle of Batman to be relevant. I think just as his own, I think he is kind of Daredevil, but with a more Moon Knight edge, if that makes sense.
Well, the Moon Knight thing, I can buy that, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, this example here of like a religious kind of like kind of a religious guy kind of fighting in a similar way, Batman is kind of taking up crusade similar to what Batman's doing here, but for a very specific purpose with the religious connotations, plays really well for him. This is a perfect place to put Jean Paul Valley in, but we had Green Arrow in the books, we had to put him in
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would also been cool if, like, in light of the whole like religious, be overcome with madness and divinity of God and all that stuff, to have maybe like Deacon Blackfire show up in this.
Yeah, there was no room for Blackfire. You're right, though. Blackfire, if he's going to show up.
Yeah.
Do you think they're ever going to do the cult?
I could see it. Like, it's kind of those stories that isn't talked about as much. But I feel like it is a story that, if adapted straight up, and I guess I don't know if you would just have Jason Todd as Robin, or just a random Robin that isn't identified as a particular iteration.
I think they gotta go Jason Todd.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm drifting us off focus here, but
what I do like it is interesting, the costume. I was kind of tripped out because like, oh, he's not wearing the classic like Robin Hood attire, or even like the hooded version in like the Mike Grell one, but I think his costume works, and I do like it was pretty cool that he fought against Poison Ivy, especially with the whole setup gag about like him saying, "Oh, no fauna," and all that, and it's like, you do know fauna means for me, fauna means like plant, right? It's like, yeah, and no plant could defeat me. What plant could defeat me? And the way that pays off was really cool.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments between them is just that moment where they kind of say "nice outfit" to each other. I thought that was like really a nice moment where he just realized, okay, that's clearly Bruce, and they're having their dying moments, and this kind of this. But also on the plus side here, is Bruce forgiving him, because we have the big revelation that his father killed the Waynes. It was a really effective way we killed the Waynes in this movie. Too. We didn't do the usual pearls and gunmen in an alley, because it would have been very inaccurate if we did that.
I was worried initially when they had, the mugger who wasn't identified at the time, like killed the Waynes, and him started laughing. He's like, "Oh, I hope to God this isn't like the Joker."
A part of me did think that, because again, I've not read the original story. I had no idea if there was a deleted Joker from Gotham by Gaslight. Not that Gotham by Gaslight is this, I don't know if 2 chapter stories, right, or if it's like a 2-volume story, but essentially there's another part of it that has the Joker in it. Mm-hmm. And we did not go that far with it. Anyway,
I also thought that like Gideon was initially the Joker, or like Victor Zsasz, because it's like, oh, he's got like Brendan. I thought was either Joker or Victor Zsasz, because it's like, I saw him. What do you see first? You just see him carving the ice. Like, oh, is he trying to do like tally marks like Victor Zsasz? And when you got closer, it's like, oh, he's got pale skin and like short hair. Is he like a Joker? Or, and the fact that he was just Mr. Freeze was a pretty decent, twist.
Let's just give him his due real quick here. I mean, again, Fabian is Harvey Dent. Again, we already mentioned he's perfectly cast. But what's really,
I would absolutely 1,000% sign off on Fabian as a live action Harvey Dent. Frankly, I think that's perfect casting.
Let me tell you why. Of course, Tiki and I would jokingly love him as the Mad Hatter, but no, in reality, he'd be. In all seriousness,
he would not actually make that.
No. That's more a running gag pitch, but no, in all seriousness, he'd be great as Harvey.
I could just see Fabian trying to do an Ed Wynn accent. Would you like some tea?
Anyway, okay, in all seriousness, though, what's really great about this take on Harvey Dent, what we do have, one, I think the main reason we cast Fabian in this, I like to think, I don't know if the timetable would work on this necessarily, assuming they saw, certain seasons of Better Call Saul. I would like to think it's we have a nice guy.
This guy is really good at having memorable departures, let's just say.
It's just the fact that we have this nice guy and something really horrible happens.
Right.
But that's the thing.
I just my one thing, because we introduce him really well with that, with the dinner scene, and then it's literally it is so rushed. We see him we see him very briefly, we're gonna fix up this city. This infestation is gonna be the main thing I'm gonna focus on with my campaign. We see that very briefly. And then, I don't know, I agree that the body horror of his transformation is really thought-provoking and cool. I get that. How we actually do it is incredibly lame, I thought. It was literally just a woman touches him.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just simultaneously has some really good Harvey Dent stuff, but also is the most underserved Harvey Dent we've gotten this side of Gotham in some ways.
Okay, come on, it's not as bad. At least it was.
No, it's not as bad as that, but nothing can be as bad as that guy.
Okay, couple things about Harvey Dent. Okay, one, I do really appreciate that we kind of took a left turn from, instead of doing Big Bad Harv or having become a criminal or completely go crazy. You got to give him credit though. The idea this guy genuinely wanted to help Gotham, and that faith that he had, and that pure goal that he had, because it's a doomed city, doomed him, and his fate was that he became one with the city when he was that whole side of himself was melded.
Sure, that's cool symbolism. That's cool. I'm just saying, the actual screen time he does have does not amount to much of an actual character. That's all I'm saying.
No, go on.
I would have liked because he has the whole coin flipping thing, traditional Two-Face, and it's I wish there was some level of thematic significance, where maybe Harvey showed half the coin being scarred.
Right, yeah.
And have that be a commentary or something about there's the good side of the city, which we may or may not, which we don't really see much of, but the two sides of every person or every individual, and have that be undergirding the thematic core about the good wrestling with the evil, or even the fact that there isn't really much explicit connection with Gotham's crime and the corruption being really connected much with the the evil entity that's trying to invade Gotham. It almost feels like Gotham is just a crappy city, and then also there's a demonic entity that just wants to come out, into Gotham.
I hear you.
And I feel there should have been more about with the deal with the deal that the founders made, there was the price to be paid, and that the entity, and that there could have been maybe some line about how over time, initially things were good, but then slowly but surely, things started to get worse, and corruption and crime came in, and in the deepest of our thoughts, we think, oh, the entity's making his presence known, and then just slowly, with Gotham going into a hellhole, or it's showing the creeping influence, and that without ghouls coming into the picture, they would just make that final connection, entanglement with the entity in Gotham City.
I I love the last moment he has with Bruce. I thought it was so good. Just the whole thing of like him recognizing instantly as Bruce Wayne in that costume, and he like they have this again. Patrick Fabian. He gives in the little time that he has, he gives a good performance. He really liked the guy, and he's saying, "Oh hey, congratulations, Mister." Oh Pete, I haven't changed anything yet. And he's like, "This guy's like getting ready to shake some babies and kiss some hands," And he's to quote Bruce Campbell, and he's he's just going there. But I love that last moment where there's such a sadness to him there, where like he kind of wishes him well, and then he leaves, and the last thing he sees is Gotham on fire. It makes him shed a tear, and then he's immolated, and all that's great. I agree. The missed opportunity, though, Tiki, perhaps, is that when we basically do like the Ghostbusters Keymaster and the Gatekeeper thing with them, man. We have Poison Ivy, and I mean, it feels like we just went with like she just touches the hand. That was her big role. She didn't like seduce him or anything. Poison Ivy, we're not going full creepy Lovecraft here of all the other Lovecraft are doing.
She didn't take a flower and just cut him, like anything.
Right, yeah.
Like at the very minimum, at a minimum, he should have kissed her hand. At a minimum, okay, just to get the whole like the death by kiss thing with.
No, she should have done the thing in like old cartoons where she just grabs Harvey Dent and just gives like the multiple smooches across his face.
Honestly, quite simply, just one kiss on the side of the face.
Or she walks away and then kisses, and then there's like a shadow of a kiss or like a wisp of a kiss that just flows by and hits Harvey's face.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so all the horrific ways we're trying to deform this poor civil servant who's actually trying to help this fledgling city. Let's see. So I like with the symbolism of the bat. I like that we kind of like we really went to the whole like meaning of the bat, where it's like it's a creature that sees through darkness and is kind of demonic, and it's like the only thing can go on an equal level with this thing. And again, we kind of prophesize the death of Bruce Wayne. So again, the whole movie's about like the legacy of kind of the next generation from the sins of the father thing. It's the fact that Bruce Wayne's legacy will endure as the Batman.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of which, so our big showdown, on the other side of the big icky Cthulhu kind of harping that doorway. Well, he's battling his friend's dead bodies. It's a
I'm
pretty
a door now, Bruce.
I was a floor in one show, now I'm a door. I went from floor to door.
Oh my God.
Isn't that right, Cheryl? You were walking all over me in the marriage. I was a floor, now I'm a door.
There should have been the song "Life Is Strange" by The Doors playing.
Oh my God.
Then Hugo Strange would walk in for his cameo.
Oh God.
It's about me. So, okay, no, seriously, he's fighting. It's a pretty metal third act. He's fighting the dead bodies of his friends who were like, "Go get him, Bruce!" Then he's fighting Ra's al Ghul, who turns into a Cthulhu creature.
And then
metal is a good word for it. I don't think there's a ton of substance there, but
no, you're right. There's not a lot of substance.
It's really cool.
Then you gotta admit, it was really cool though when Batman turns into that bat and we have like the prophecy.
Oh, I mean, as Rohith kind of said off the top, like I think it's a really, really great like ending beat for him.
It's him saying, "I am Batman."
It's a damn good "I am Batman," man. It's a damn good use of "I am Batman."
And also, again, it's just obviously it's a very important moment in the history of Batman and media. But and plus it's an animated movie, and we don't get to this point without that point in the first place. But the fact that we have On Leather Wings being the real big moment for Batman the Animated Series and Batman the Animation, so the fact that we've kind of combined the two characters from that episode.
Right, yeah.
There's something really, really cool about that. And the idea that he's fully been wrapped up. And there have been a few takes on this sort of thing recently. Not to the same degree, like literalizing like him becoming a bat. But like, Rohith, did you ever read that Creature of the Night story that Kurt Busiek did?
No, I did not.
Well, essentially, like recently, we've kind of done things where, like, what if we had Batman as a literal bat creature, at least in some sense of the word, at least to some degree. So this is like going full tilt with it. Then,
I feel like you could easily do a full Elseworlds movie with that premise.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That story I told you essentially is it's Bruce Wayne, but he has like a guardian angel that is essentially a man bat creature that is Batman going.
That almost sounds kind of Moon Knight-esque.
It's a little Moon Knight-esque, but he's not turning into this thing. But I don't. Well, I don't know. It's really cool. being my point anyway. So the fact that we have Etrigan and Man-Bat kind of saving the day, fulfilling the prophecy they're going up against, basically the climax of the first Hellboy movie, only what if the creature actually made it all the way through?
God.
You know? And yeah, so the ending. So the ending here is like the only one of the other few changes from the book. Very few. They actually... Bruce Wayne, in quote, the cover story was that he survived, but we actually said, Bruce Wayne died because essentially, he died.
I actually think this ending is essentially just like a much more satisfying version of what they were trying to do with The Dark Knight Rises.
I know but Tiki, I think that was intentional. Though. I think that's
or even a satisfying version of the Arkham Knight ending.
That's true. There's a little bit of that too. This feels. We've poked in the DC animated stuff. They poked fun at Dark Knight Rises a number of times. I think,
yeah.
The one that springs to mind.
Bane, of course.
Well, sure, but even beyond Harley Quinn, I mean, even like more like like kind of for everyone, because sort of fair. Like we have Return of the Cape Crusaders. We have like Catwoman like suggesting the ending of Dark Knight Rises.
sure.
Hopefully unsatisfying ending, Batman. So the fact that we kind of taken some pot shots there. This feels like, again, Rohit's absolutely right.
I still think it would have been a decent ending if that movie would have just ended with like
Christian Bale turning into a literal bat
is it what?
Christian Bale turning into a literal bat creature. That's how we should have ended.
Well, no, I was gonna say like I actually do. I don't mind the beat of kind of like leaving it up to like, okay, like is Alfred just like imagining that he's seen Bruce, or is he actually, because we set up the cafe thing with Alfred like early on in the movie. That is a decent like Nolan-esque ambiguous note to end on. I just don't like the fact that we literally end on like, and now the guy who we don't really care about, who kind of hijacked the whole movie, is Batman. Yay!
Anyway,
I would have liked if maybe like there was just random Batman sightings, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt wasn't part of the whole Batman thing, but just but just with Christian Bale's death, the Batman legend lives on, and people
sure.
Basically, what if the Sons of Batman was legit?
Yeah, because that would have tied into, especially when you see like the little kids drawing like the bat symbol with chalk. That would then transform like Batman being sort of like a soul legend that inspired.
Basically, it would have been We Are Batman.
Yeah,
I mean, let's face it. Everything that's good about that ending all ties up into Alfred.
Well, regardless, without getting all completely on the Rises thing, it's just the fact that we kind of found a way to yet again kind of like kind of take a stab at it, whether it be that or like Rohit was saying,
I think the idea of Batman being like a literal creature of the night, like a gargoyle ass monster, like literally hiding in the shadows but overseeing and protecting Gotham. It's super fucking cool, dude.
And seeing him in the bell. Cool. The bell tower idea, yeah.
I'll say this: like, if we really think about it, let's say there's an imaginary sequel, and Batman comes back to Alfred and Kylie, and just lives among the cave. Just imagine like Alfred having to like clean up all the Batguano and not know answer Bruce.
It's going to call to mind that moment from Phantasm. I dive at your bottom, sir.
But also, it's like, what if like Bruce as Man-Bat, like he tries to be like how Man-Bat is portrayed in Harley Quinn, like have like maybe he tries to run Wayne Tech or Wayne Industries, and he's just talking. You can see his human dialogue, but nobody understands him.
Oh God!
All right.
I think on that note, do we have any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, to give it credit, just to end on, like, not just Bruce Wayne going to court with a tie. I just want to suggest, I want to highlight, the bell tower idea is really cool in terms of, like, instead of doing the falling through the cave or specifically crime out, in fact, he runs up to that back, to the bell tower, which is also, you'll notice, it's a cool little Easter egg. When the Waynes die, it says 10:47 on that clock. It's when they always die, 10:47. Anyways, the fact that he goes up there and that's where he resides now, it's a really unique idea that Batman, in a sense, ultimately he fulfilled his mission and avenged what got his parents killed. So that's very rare when we do that.
But it also ties to like sort of Batman lore, because there's the whole Belfry, the headquarters or space where the Oracle, where like judicial Oracle is with the Birds of Prey. So Batman as like a little creature in a bell tower or in a clock tower. That's kind of
Yeah.
So very
yeah.
Tom.
Rohit, what do you got? Final thoughts?
Overall, I think it's a really cool movie that it's a decent movie for the most part with a really good third act. So I think it'd be interesting upon further rewatches if maybe it's something that you kind of just slog through the first act and then things kind of pick up in like the second or third act. But I think it's a really great mix of traditional Batman lore and the aesthetics and ethos of Lovecraft into like a fun, animated film that has decent animation, good action, and just really great atmosphere.
Dragon?
Yeah, again, I'm wowed by it. I enjoyed it. It's I still don't like it as much as I did Gotham by Gaslighting, and that one has like a little bit more Mignola going on there in terms of like the art style and the story. But again, I don't want to measure it by that for what we got here. What we got here was a really great take on Lovecraft, and I mean, it's ultimately it's Batman. It's Batman is a horror movie. It's Batman like taking on Lovecraft, and I think in the way we executed that, we did an excellent job. It's just it's not my go-to with Batman. In terms of I'm not actively seeking out Lovecraft. I'm not a diehard horror guy, but I think like it was such a unique experience in filtering it through Batman, just taking the existing mythology and kind of like melding it together like we should in Elseworlds stories. I think it was a very well communicated Elseworlds story, and it was unique. And I like when we kind of swing for the fences like that, when we go full tilt and we get an effective ending like we did get. So it all worked out. It's quite good.
Yeah, I think this is a solid little movie for sure. It's definitely not one of my. It's not one of my stronger of the recent DC animated output. Like I would probably put Soul of the Dragon over this if I'm being honest. But it is decent for sure, and the third act absolutely elevates it. I still just think it's got a few too many pacing problems, and I think in some ways it tries to do a little bit too much with its runtime. I don't know how you would rectify that because DC just doesn't really do like miniseries. So I don't know. I wish they did because I think there's a lot of material that they could really, that would work really well in that kind of format. But alas. So yeah, I enjoyed this for what it is. I don't really think a lot of it besides the ending and Oliver Queen are going to really stick with me, but it's still pretty decent. So yeah, I wish I had stronger feelings on it, but alas.
I think this would make a good companion piece to Gotham by Gaslight for like a fun Batman, like a Halloween or horror themed Batman night.
Totally. I do agree with Dragon, though. I ultimately think what this movie's biggest problem is, and it's probably unfair to say, but it is kind of living in the shadow of Gotham by Gaslight. I agree that was a much stronger overall film and well-told story. So
it doesn't help the costumes are pretty much the same either.
Yeah, right.
Not one for one, but it's pretty close. Let's be honest.
Hot take. I prefer this costume over the Gotham by Gaslight costume.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, so big thanks to Warp Monarch for joining us in the chat here, and yeah, we will see y'all later. Have a good night.
No Flora can stop me.
Check it out, Bruce. You like my knobs?